Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Houndsman XP Podcast. I've been fortunate enough to hunt and live and get to know some of the most iconic and greatest houndsmen in the coon hunting world right here in Indiana. And Donnie Huber is one of those guys. Not only has he handled and hunted some top hounds in the Treem Walker breed, but he's also served the hunting community, the coon hunting community, through his service with the Treem Walker Association, the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance, and his own home club there, which you're going to hear all of these stories, Hannah's Creek Conservation Club. All the times I've been around Donnie, all the meetings that we attended and sat through together with the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance, I can honestly say that Donnie is just a jovial type person. He's naturally happy. He's willing to put on a smiling face and get the job done. He's a people person that people like being around. And he's accomplished establishing that reputation for himself, all while competing at the highest levels in competition coon hunting and within the coon hunting community. In this episode, you're going to hear about stories of hunting the old ways in the old days, and it's going to bring you right up to modern times of where we're at today, all through the eyes of Donnie Huber. Before we get to that conversation with Donnie, there are a couple things that I've got to tell you. First and foremost, there are only 2 weeks left in our live auction site to raise money for the fight in Colorado to defeat the animal extremists who are trying to ban lion hunting in the state of Colorado, a total departure from science-based and responsible wildlife management. This is your opportunity to visit our website at houndsmanxp.com, and there's a banner at the top called Save the Hunt. And we're having an online auction. You can sign up to join us in Kiowa, Colorado for a Sporting Clays event. If you can't make the event, you can sponsor a military shooter. We've partnered up with Freedom Hunters on this, and you can sponsor a shooting station. There's lots of ways that you can contribute to this and stand up for lion hunters and lion hunting. This is our moment to stand up for our traditions, our lifestyles, and the things that we are so passionate about. Go to houndsmanxp.com and support the efforts. Another way that you can support is by going to houndsmanxp.com and purchasing a bottle of Ledged Out straight bourbon whiskey, the only bourbon that's ever been created with the purpose of supporting lion hunters, hounds, and lion hunting. We've got less than 40 bottles of this stuff left, so it's going quick, and it's not going to last long. We're going to start shipping it out to different events to be auctioned off at these fundraisers for state organizations and things like that. So don't delay. Guys, let's get the tailgate down. It's time to dump the box. I just wanted to come up and talk to you, Donnie. I've known you for years, hunting out of Hannah's Creek and stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we've ever sat down and talked about the old days, like when you got your start and everything else.
Well, whenever we was somewhere, we was either doing business with the Houndsman Association or busy at the club, and it's just kind of a hi and how you doing and all that. We never really got to sit and, like you say, just sit down and visit.
Yeah, and I'd run into you at Autumn Oaks when you guys had, the slugger booth and stuff up there, but you were talking to everybody then. And a lot of people to talk to about the dogs you had and slugger, and you knew I wasn't hunting walkers, so you weren't going to talk to me very long.
Yeah, when I had people standing there buying pups, I was busy with that.
Yeah. You knew you weren't going to sell one of them to me. You're like, he hunts plots. He ain't going to buy one of these things.
But then you've switched over a little too, haven't you? Since
Yeah. I kind of started. I've always been that guy though that I just can't go along with the crowd.
Yeah.
I'm not.
If I hadn't have been as close as I was in the Walker breed, and then with Frank also, I would have hunted whatever suited me. if I found something in a different breed. It didn't bother me. I never was that colorblind, but once I got into that and then got that bloodline started, I kind of had to stay with it,
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, you go way back in the Trim Walker breed, and I used to, believe it or not, I used to be a member.
Was you?
Yeah. Back long time ago, I hunted a dog named Sugar Creek Joe. Started out hunting him for Wallens.
Oh, yeah.
He was that white-faced dog, had a calico ear, and for Robin George Wallen, I ended up buying him. And when I was going to Walker Days, then to qualify for the awards, then you had to be a member.
Had to be a member, yeah. To win a trophy, you did.
Yeah. He's a pretty fair hound. So
I've been a member since 1970 of the Walker Association. I've missed 3 years of going to it.
Walker Days.
This year was one of them. Mm-hmm. I was sick at the time, and I was kind of getting over it, but I didn't want to go and give somebody else stuff too, because everybody's shaking hands with you and stuff. But
sure.
They had it in North Carolina one time, and I didn't go. And one other time, our anniversary is on the weekend of Walker Days every year. And Lord and behold, I went. She been fine with it, over all them years.
Did you ever talk her into being like, it'd be a great date? We could just.
Well, she there for a while. When I was on the board, she went with me because her and I chaired the Lee Crawford hunt. We took care of that for the years, and then I done the yearbook for quite a few years too. And then that's why she was going along with me. And she met some of the other ladies, and we got them to doing entries and stuff for us, because used to the guys had to sit there and do all that.
Yeah.
And that was they even once in a while get a cake for us for our anniversary. So we was married 54 years in April, this last April.
So 54 years of marriage. And so that would have put it 1970, right? Mm-hmm. So you didn't go the first year of Walker Days?
No, that's
1970.
That's when.
Or did you get married at Walker Days, Donnie?
No, we got married here, but I got to go for the last part of the weekend.
Oh, gee, I don't know about that. I'm surprised you've been married for 54 years.
That's what everybody says. That's what I say. I've got a good one. I found one that works for me.
Yeah.
Because I've spent a lot of time out on the road traveling to them hunts, and we always celebrated it another weekend or something. But.
Yeah, you're blessed, buddy. You're blessed for sure.
Yeah, because I know coon hunting has cost a lot of marriages over the years for people, friends that I knew, and that's probably that's not the whole reason, but that contributed to it,
Yeah.
That a lot of them can't be away that much, And she likes her alone time, and I do too, so that works out for us.
That's kind of the way my wife is. I know when I can be gone and when I can't be gone, and so I I don't always do a good job. Thank goodness my wife doesn't listen to these podcasts, because she'd be you bull crap, buddy. You hunted way too much. You do this way too much, but she's always been super about it, but I also kind of knew the limits,
Yeah, when to take a night off,
pump the brakes a little bit. Yeah,
but she's been good. She's never said nothing about my hunting. Or never said nothing if I was going to take off for a weekend or whatever. She took care of everything at home, and I've been blessed.
She used to always come to all the Tree Dog Alliance banquets and everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those were the days when we were running the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance, and
I enjoyed that too. And everybody kept asking me after we quit the banquets there for a while. Said, "Man, when's the banquet? I haven't seen that." A lot of just local guys here, they enjoyed going to that.
Yeah. It's just like anything else, it ebbs and flows, and hopefully, I'll tell you what the biggest problem is. There isn't any major threat to coon hunting and hounds in the state of Indiana. And what's going to happen is there'll be something happen And then everybody's going to come out of the woodwork and say, where's the Hoosier Tree Dog Alliance? And you and I can sit back and say, well, where were you when we were running it?
Right.
Because if they would have stepped up then and got involved, it'd still be strong. It'd still be rolling good.
It done good. Like you say, it had its turn, and we got it going good and done a lot for the hunters. You did, and Jerry going to Indianapolis for different things, those round tables and all that. And these average members don't know that. They don't know what all's involved in that until something hits them.
Right.
And then they jump up. I've even had people from Kentucky ask me about what to do with people trying to shoot their dogs and all that, And like we done to start with, we tried to give people information, but you can't use all your sources and your funds for someone in another state that's not even a member.
Or even somebody in your own state that's not a member. And we did. We did help some people that weren't members over the years. But, yeah, it's like buying insurance, If you got your house insured or you don't pay your insurance up, you let it lapse and then your house burns down, you can't run down and buy insurance after the fire.
Right.
And that's what I used to have to tell a lot of people. And they're like, well, can I join now? It's like...
But even though we could still give them the right channels, what they need to do and all that, and I done that with a couple of them in Kentucky, told them what route they need to go and everything. And it guided them to where they did get some satisfaction from it or whatever. Yeah. We had a shooting down here during the zones from UKC. A boy from Portland, Indiana, guided a cast down here at the Brookville Lake. And he was from away from here. Somebody else had to tell him where to go. And the dog got away from him, got over on private ground to a guy that joins down there behind the lake. And he shot the dog. And it was one of the dogs, I think it was one of the Stallard boys was hunting it for Vanover in Kentucky.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard about that one. That's a bad deal.
Yeah.
But... How'd you get into coon hunting, Donnie?
Well, my grandpa and my dad both hunted, and I started hunting when I was about 8 years old.
What year were you born?
1950.
1950, okay.
And back then, there wasn't youth hunts. If you went and hunted in a hunt, you hunted against the adults.
Right.
And it was more open hunts back then. It wasn't like UKC and stuff. They were just hunts. There was 3 local clubs here that put on big hunts for just open dogs,
Yeah.
And
I remember back in the day when they used to have grade hunts and
that's what I'm
clubs
talking about.
Had buddy hunts.
Yeah.
And you kept points. There were so many hunters that came to the local club back in the day that they actually ran point systems for people all year long and then gave the award away at the end of the year.
Yeah, they got our club, the Everton Club, and what now is the Wayne County Club, but before that it was called the Whitewater Club, and it was up on the river up there by Richmond.
Yeah.
And them and our club and Everton done what you're saying. They took all the top 4 dogs that had the most cast wins for the summer.
Yep.
And they take those top 4 dogs and hunt them for the club championship.
Yeah.
And I won that when I was 13 years old and won it again the next year. I won it 2 years in a row, the Tri-County Championship for those 3 clubs together. And there was times
That's pretty cool.
There's times we hunted 40 or 50 dogs at a hunt.
So all 3 clubs went in together, and you had a Tri-County Championship.
You marked down every cast winner at every hunt, and they'd go through there and take the 4 dogs that had the most cast wins and make that a final cast for a championship.
No kidding.
And I was hunting a little red tick-looking cur dog. His ears just barely turned down. And he was a coon treeing machine. I'd love to have him today with these money hunts.
Yeah.
I mean, he was sneaky, and I don't remember going to a slick tree on him. I swear I don't. He was either a den or a coon.
How much of that did you put in your early walker dogs?
I wish. I'm telling you, I wish. some of these dogs today, I've kind of wondered if we haven't about bred ourselves into a corner.
We'll get into that. Hey, so let's talk about hunting here. Like, you kind of opened the door there to the talking about the way it used to be. But like, your grandpa hunted, your dad hunted, and we're sitting in the house that you were born and raised in. So we're not very far away from your roots. So you grew up hunting all this country, all around here. What was it like?
I hunted. It was real hunting down there where the lake is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when it was the little towns and the river, the Whitewater River, there was a road running down both sides of it, and would go from here clear to Fairfield.
Yeah.
And you could drive along that river road and just keep dropping and hunting and dropping and hunting. And that's why when that lake went in, I kept hunting it. And there were so many people would say, why do you hunt that lake all the time? Because back then, patch hunting was the thing.
Right.
You know, and in a cast, they wanted to patch hunt where they could build points, you know, because you had to have them scores instead of just the cast wins like they got now. But you make a better dog hunting that rougher stuff where that dog's got to stay treed more than 3 or 4 or 5 minutes.
Right.
And a lot of times you drive around, you know, to where they work closer way in or something, you know. And that's just the hunting that's the way I've always hunted. I've tried to hunt rough stuff, water and things, because if you're going to go to a hunt, you're going to be in that kind of terrain somewhere.
Right.
And if you just hunt them little patchwoods and go get them off a tree and bring them back and go, you know, that'll hurt you in a cast. Dog will go back to a tree or something, you know, or not used to that kind of terrain. But it was always real good hunting there. I would say back in the day when I was young or a teenager, there probably wasn't 5 farms in this whole county that we couldn't hunt. You know, you had permission on about every one of them.
Nobody cared.
No, and my dad knew all those people and my grandpa, and they knew all of us, you know. But then as we got older, those farms got sold to different people, and it just kept graduating up to where people lease ground now to hunt and don't want you in there for turkey hunting or deer hunting. That's what's made that whole change. And if we didn't have that state property, that Brookfield Lake, we would be hard to put dogs in the woods out of our club. That lake's a savior for us.
Yep.
Because, you know, there's so many people don't have no permission. And you can't take a cast out there where you don't have permission, you know, and get everybody arrested or something, you know.
Right.
And that's why that lake saves us.
Do you think people can't get permission or they don't try anymore?
Well, a lot of them don't try, but a lot of them have asked different ones. And like I say, those farms have changed hands and the farms are leased and the ground's leased for the farmer. You know, a lot of them don't farm their own ground anymore.
I'll tell you what, most of the tractors, you know, pulling planters through those fields, they're leasing that ground now.
Right.
Yeah, but this is what I found. The guys that lease that ground have a lot of pull with the landowner. And if they can start complaining about that crop damage, then I can get in there and hunt.
Yeah.
We've got farms down there where I'm at, Donnie, where you get back next to those woodlots and stuff, get back in those corners. And come September, the corn's just yanked down on the ground. You can't even walk through there. And I know you see it up here, too.
Oh, I can remember a lot of places you couldn't walk through it.
Yeah.
You'd have to get over so many rows to get around it because right at the edges, they just had it down, just tramp them down everywhere, you know.
Yep.
But legally, the way I understand it, is a man that leases that ground for the crops and farming it has got to say so over the hunting, unless the landowner specifies that he wants to do it. But majority of them have the say so to let you hunt.
The leasees of farmland can hunt the ground without permission or without a license, but here's the landowner still has control. What I mean is that farmer, he's already got the relationship with the landowner, and it's easier for him to go into the landowner and say, hey, we need to do something about some coons in there.
Right.
Need to let these guys hunt. So knowing that guy that's holding those leases is valuable down there where I'm at.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I've got one guy that he pulls machinery all over the county, and go to church with him. And so he's like, yep, I can get you permission to hunt there. It helps me.
Well, sure. Yeah.
So
any way you can get in there.
That's right. That's right. So,
but I guarantee you right now, I mean, of course, I'm not hunting now with my problems and disability and all that. But prior to that, there wasn't 5 farms that we couldn't hunt. And that turned around. I only had about 5 farms I could hunt.
Oh, I know.
Now, that's how much of a change.
It's a real challenge. I'm not saying that people aren't putting in the effort to find places to hunt, but like places that I hunted when I was a kid, I can't go back there and hunt now.
Right.
And back in the day, we didn't even ask permission, Donnie. And I was on the eastern side of Bartholomew County out there, and I'll tell you how it was. We'd go to church on Sunday, and Mr. Huffman would say, I saw your truck parked up there in my lane the other night. You guys get any coons?
Yeah.
And that's just the way it was. It was the Arnholts, everybody was that way. It's like, you guys do any good? And they want to hear the hunting stories. And now people but that's a cultural problem. People don't even know their neighbors anymore.
Right. And they don't, the generations that have changed on the farmers now don't know what a coon hunter is.
Right.
They see lights out there, and then they go out and they hear dogs, but then they see lights getting close to their barns or anything like that. They think
they figure it's a meth head trying to steal copper, or somebody trying to steal diesel or gas or whatever.
Yeah.
But so, what was the first? Let's talk about some of those early trim walkers you had. As much as it hurts me to sit here and do a podcast about trim walkers. I'm just kidding you.
My first registered dog was when we got married. Prior to being married before 1970, I hunted English dog, mixed up dog, black and tan, whatever.
But everything was great.
Whatever we found that we liked and bought, that's what we hunted.
I kind of did the same thing.
And that's what we bred. My grandpa had a blue female, and Dad had a black and tan. He wasn't full black and tan, and they bred them, and they looked like black and tans with a blue tick chest and blue tick on their legs.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there was some good dogs come out of them 2 dogs, and that's what we hunted back then. And, they were just crossbreeding, like what they've done now or allowed them to do now in registries. But
X-bred.
Yeah, but back then we were doing, and what we was breeding was cross. So you had about 4 different breeds in 2 dogs.
Yep, and a whole lot of fun. And when we were growing up, and I was born, I'm about 19 years younger than you are, I guess, Donnie, but we probably grew up pretty similar, because it seems like after 1970 or after 1980, everything kind of hit the gas pedal on technology and the way our culture changed and stuff like that. But we were hunting the same way. You go to New Bern, Indiana, and we'd all meet at the store and sit around and tell stories. And we were just kids. Our parents knew we weren't getting in trouble. We were out coon hunting.
Yeah.
And doing a little outlawing. That's probably where we didn't get, we were lucky we didn't get in trouble more than we did. But everybody knew we weren't hurting anything, you know. We weren't out partying and stealing stuff and tearing stuff up.
But now also you get somebody where they've sold some of these. There was a farm right above the club there that went from one road to the other. Mm-hmm. And when that family passed away, their children or grandchildren sold that farm off in 10-acre plots. And that put houses all the way up through there. And it stopped the hunting altogether, because they had 10 acres and they thought they owned 110.
Yep.
If a dog got even close to them, they don't know what it was or what it is,
Right.
And that's kind of our fault too, because I can remember back in the 80s, we used to have a supper at our club down there.
Yep.
And give every one of the members a bunch of tickets, and they went to all the landowners and gave them tickets, and we had them down there for a supper.
Mm-hmm.
And that helped us then also to still be able to hunt a lot of these farms. We had farmers down there that were seeing what we were doing and introduced ourselves to the ones we didn't know. And,
right.
And it was a pretty good deal. And we just kind of feathered out and quit doing that.
We need to do a podcast sometime and talk about how to make a club successful, because Hannah Creek's always been successful. You know, you guys got a nice clubhouse, nice grounds. You host some big hunts, you're involved with Autumn Oaks. You know, you've been a big part of that.
Yeah.
The whole time, Donnie, and we need to do that sometime.
We've been lucky because the gentleman that owned that farm where our club is, if you go past the club and cross that little bridge and up there, that first farm on the right is a guy that owned all that. And he was a member down there when they started that club, and he put it in his will. He donated that club to us free of charge with 12 acres.
No kidding.
That field that's there next to it, which we lease that out every year for crops, you know, that's an income for us.
Carmack.
Yeah, he does it now, but we've had other club members.
I was going to give Carmack a hard time.
You know.
Got it at a discount rate because he worked at the club.
Yeah. We finally got to the point we let a club member have it first, you know, over somebody else. But for years, we've leased that out. Dad and I even leased it for a long while.
Yeah.
But that's one thing that's helped us. Plus, we got in at the right time on some major hunts and made some money and have been self-sufficient ever since then, you know.
Yeah.
But him giving us that ground and that first little building was our best jump start. You know, we didn't owe nothing.
Yeah.
And
what year would have that been?
I'm trying to think when he passed away.
What year was the club started?
1952. My dad and my grandpa used my grandpa's horses and pulled logs off of that hill behind it down there to build that club. And the guy that owned that ground let them have them trees and everything. They built the club, and he became a member also, the guy that owned it. And then,
did it start out as a conservation club? And then
it was more just like
it was a sportsman's club,
right? And they had turkey shoots, actual give turkey meat, you know, not just money and all that, and that kind of stuff. And that, you had a variety of people that were members, and then Dad and the coon hunters started putting grade hunts on along with the other thing. Well, then those guys would come and work the kitchen in there while the coon hunters had their hunt and stuff, you know, and it was a variety of people. Now it's just coon hunters only, you know, but that's why it was called Conservation Club.
Yeah.
Back then. But when you asked me earlier when I started on the hunting, I won my first cast when I was 8 years old, and I still got the trophy. A little cast trophy, about 4 inches tall.
You know where it's at?
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to take a look at that. I'm going to get your picture with it.
It's out in the garage. I know where it is. The little tails broke off of it and stuff. But
they're all broke off. All my trophies from way back when.
And I've lost a plate off the front of it somehow in our moving. I've glued it on 2 or 3 times. But when I won it, they said, "Can we keep that trophy?" And Dad said, he's going to want that trophy. And they said, well, we want to go get the plate changed. Instead of just saying cast winner, it had the dog's name and my name and the year.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I need to get another plate and just put on it really for the grandkids and them down the road or something.
Yeah.
You know? But it was 1958, and I hunted Dad's best dog, and he hunted another one that wasn't as good. And, of course, all the guys in that cast knew that dog. They hunted with him before, you know, and cast and things. And back then, he could turn me loose and count on them taking care of me, you know, at that age.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't stick an 8-year-old kid out there with a real good dog for nothing. But he didn't worry about it. And I won that cast. And, boy, they took a lot of ribbon for a while on that.
No track and collar.
Oh, no.
We
didn't even know what that was.
Yeah, leather collars. And
if you lost a dog back then, we'd lay our coat down.
Yeah.
And go home if we had to go home and work and all that and come back, and dog be on that coat. being laying there. But you didn't lose them that often back then. We didn't have the deer and all that kind of stuff or nothing, for them to blow out of the country on.
Mm-hmm. But even a dog that blows out of the country, when they get done right, when they get tired, they
know where to
where to come back to.
Yeah.
Because I've had them do that.
Yeah.
I've had them blow out of the country and go back through there the next day. That's still not a bad trick. Dogs will still do it.
And I'd have to dig somewhere for the pictures, but even before I started hunting, when I was in school, and Dad and them every year at the end of the year on the front of this garage out here, they hung all their coon hides up for the year and took pictures. And I've got pictures of me about that tall standing between them dogs. He'd come get me out of school and bring me down for the pictures and take me back to school. I mean, before I was even ever hunting. So it was in my blood from the start.
Most people I talked to and interviewed, Donnie, they for the podcast, they started out coon hunting when they were young, and then when they got a driver's license, then they started competition hunting. But you just jumped right in.
Yeah. That's why I say it's been, that was the hardest thing I've ever had to give up.
Yeah. The coon hunting side. Yeah, it's gets in your blood and it just stays with us, But you still go down to the club and still got your reserved parking spot down there.
Master hounds and all that, you know. A lot of the times, and I've quit doing the PKC. Mike and Kevin Cable take care of the PKC hunts. I go down there, and if they need a guide, I can drive over there and drop them off, or show them where to go and all that. But I mainly just master hounds a little bit. Yeah. The one thing I haven't done down there, and I told them from the start, all of them, I don't do kitchen work.
Thanks. We appreciate it.
I don't do that. Yeah, because I don't cook here. And if I tried to do down there, then she'd be wondering why I didn't do that here.
Yeah, I made that mistake. We started cooking at home, and I don't mind it though. I like doing it. I enjoy cooking. But
now my oldest grandson, he does all the cooking.
Yeah,
he likes it. But what I was going to tell you earlier, that first walker dog, I was hunting those grade dogs, and they UKC licensed hunts was just getting ready to start in this area around 1970, 72, something in there when I got that first registered dog. But those guys told Dad, the one Lee Crawford and Ralph Older and some of those guys that lived over here above Connorsville, they had registered walkers.
Yeah.
Well, Dad and them, they'd bring them registered dogs to them grade hunts and still hunt. But they told Dad, they said, you need to get that boy a registered dog.
Yeah.
He said, he's handled them dogs all these years. You need to get him a good registered dog.
And your dad's name was Howard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just so everybody knows, Howard was your dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oscar was my grandpa.
And what they call your dad?
Fat Huber. That's a nickname he's had ever since he was a little kid. Like I said, he's even got mail that way here. Fat Huber.
Yeah. So
there's a lot of people here that didn't know his first name.
That's what I was getting ready to say. So anybody that's listening to this podcast, if you know the name Fat Huber, you know who we're talking about. But you're talking about having those registered dogs. I remember those days. And even being kind of, I was kind of infatuated with all of it. If somebody had registered blue ticks or they had registered English dogs, I remember looking in books and stuff, and I remember meeting Bert Noney back in the day, and he had registered English dogs.
Yeah.
And the same way with Treeing Walkers, there were some people over there, and they were majestic looking. I mean, a lot of them had those full blanket back, white legs, and they were beautiful.
I liked a tricolored English dog instead of just a red tick or a blue tick. I like the tricolored.
I do too.
Where
I've got one at the house.
Back and brown down their leg, and then white with ticks in it, and stuff. And to me, that's what the original English dogs were, and how they got going and stuff. But a little story I was going to tell you on my first registered dog. was 1970, and that's when we got married. Well, shortly after, we had our son, our first child. And I had just changed jobs and didn't have insurance. And when I took her in, they had to call me on CB radio when her water broke for me to come take her to the hospital. So I came and took them over there, and when I dropped her off, they started doing the paperwork, and they asked if I had insurance, and I said no. They said, well, you've got to have some money up front here before we can do anything. And she's sitting in a chair in the hallway in labor. And my mom went with me, and good thing she did, and she gave them $100 bill before they do anything at Connersville Hospital. And I said, well, how much is this going to be? And they said, with no complications, it's going to be anywhere from $600 to $800. So I had to sell my first registered dog and my motorcycle to pay for my first son being born. And there went my registered dog right away after
I noticed you mentioned the registered dog part before the motorcycle.
Yeah.
But you had to sell both
to pay for our son being born because I didn't have insurance. I just changed jobs.
But back in those days, that insurance wasn't I remember sitting in the doctor's office. Mom wrote a check for $20.
Yeah.
To get almost anything done, from a splinter to stitches to get my stomach pumped. It's $20.
Right.
Yeah.
And I told my mom, I said, well, I guess I'm going to have to wash dishes or something around here for a while. But
start cooking.
That's what I did. And then, of course, after he was born, then I saved up a little, got another one. But my first dog was, you probably heard all the Walker men talk about Laverne Miller. Him and Lee Crawford were the backbone of the Walker Association from this area. And
well, they were for all over because Lee Crawford's got the hunt named after him.
And he just lived right here above Connersville.
Yeah.
And him and Ralph Oler talked Dad into getting me into a Walker dog to start with, and that's how I did it. But then that's the one I had to sell, and I had him going pretty good. And then after that, I just kept looking around, saving up, and finally got another dog, and then just kept on. And once I done that, then I stayed with Walkers the rest of the time. Now, my dad, he'd hunt anything. If whichever best one he could find, it didn't matter to him.
Yeah.
So while I was hunting the Walker dogs, he bought an English dog out of Kentucky, and we went to English days. And he said, I'm going to sign you up for a member here because if you do any good, you're going to have to be a member of this. So at one time, I was a member of the English Association and the Walker Association.
There's probably plenty of people that they were all members of the English Association until, 1946 or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, when the Treem Walker became a recognized breed. Well, what were 1970, you saw the dogs like Murchis Bombali and Banjo and, all those. You've seen them all.
Yeah.
Donnie.
And Miller's Rock was what my dog
Miller's
was.
Rock.
That's what my first dog was out of.
And who had Spring Creek Rock?
Dwayne Clark.
And
then Billy Stinson with Radar. And then I hunted and handled dogs for him for a few years.
Did you hunt Radar?
No, I didn't. I hunted the dogs out of him.
What was his registered name?
Radar?
Yeah.
Stinson's Radar.
Okay. All right.
And then he had a dog called Bobby, and he brought him to me and wanted me to hunt him, so I started hunting him, and then he wanted me to hunt him in some hunts, so I made him night champion and went to Walker Days out in Iowa. I can't remember what town it was now. And I needed one more win to make him a grand. And I got the night champion win, and that was then the first Lee Crawford hunt was at Warsaw, Indiana. And I hunted Bob Kettering's female there and won second place in the very first one and got a belt buckle and stuff they give you for that back then. And she treed again 4 minutes before the hunt was over, but I was leading the cast, and I thought, I'm not gambling. I just let it go.
Yeah.
And if I'd have treed her on that last tree, I'd have won First Lee Crawford first place. There was that close difference from first to second.
Yeah.
It's always second thoughts, hindsight and all that. But
if you got it that's the thing about competition hunting. UKC, it's not about just winning your cast. When you go to those big hunts, you don't know what the other cast got, and you got to come in with that score.
Right. And then, they still do as far as the breed hunts and stuff like that, place them down through there. But since they made that change from just win your cast and get 5 cast wins, to make your dogs degrees, champions, and all that.
Yeah.
Scores have dropped in half of what they were.
What do you think that is, Donnie?
Well, that's just
an observation you made, isn't it?
The proof's in the pudding.
Yeah.
When it didn't matter if you had 800 plus or 300 plus.
What's the most points you've ever scored in a hunt?
Myself?
Yep.
1,100 points. And I mean, we had to hustle to
You were clicking it, weren't you?
And it was a 3-hour hunt.
A 3-hour hunt? 1,100.
Back then, they were 3-hour hunts. That's why when I was on the board to Walker Association, they started coming in with them 1,500, 1,600 points and all that in 2-hour hunts.
It's hard to believe, wasn't it?
I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, deep down, I just knew, because when we scored that night, and the most I've ever seen scored other than what I had, a guy got 1,200 one night, and he won the cast. I didn't win it. He did.
How did you hunt?
And we hustled. When we got treed, back then a lot of times dogs treed together.
Yeah.
And when we got them all gathered up, we got out and moved. And when they all got treed, boom, we was there. We had to cut it that close and do that kind of moving to tree them many coons.
Yep.
And then these other guys that come in with 1,100 points and all that in 2-hour hunts, and I'm thinking, man, I just don't know how they do it.
Right.
And I've never seen it. 1,200's the most I've ever seen, and I mean, it was a job to get it done.
Yeah. And kind of give everybody a sense, with nobody that's listening, somebody sitting in Alabama doesn't know if they've never been up here. We're just south of Richmond, Indiana here, where Autumn Oaks is held. So if you've ever been to Richmond, you can just go north of Liberty here and be basically hunting farmland and patch woods and, stuff like that. And the way that I've seen scores scored like that and been involved in scores like that is just like you said. You leave the clubhouse, you drive to the first spot, you dump the dogs, get treed, you don't mess around, you get in there and get the tree scored, and you call a timeout, and you walk it back to the truck. But even when you're doing that, sometimes it's hard to beat that deadline getting back.
That's the only thing that hurt is you had to be able to be close enough that if you're going to hunt that way, to make it back to the clubhouse for the deadline.
And you'd come in with a card, like there's 3 columns in the strike category, there's 3 in the tree category, and all that stuff. You came back with the card filled up with scores.
Yeah, it
was amazing.
And I've always said every mile you drive north is better coons, more coons. You could just about from below Brookville, from there, like I say, clear on up to Portland or whatever up through there. Every mile you go, the coon hunting gets better.
Yeah, and I think there's a strategy, and I think some guys figured it out. Like if we're going to patch hunt and we're going to cut dogs down this fence row, we're not going to stand up next to the edge of the road if we're going to patch hunt for a high score. When those dogs go that way, it's like, come on, guys, we need to walk this way. And you're going to be within, you're not going to interfere with the dogs, but you're going to be within 60, 70, 100 yards of that patch woods. And as soon as everything's scored or treed, you're getting in there as quick as you can and grab it.
You have to if you're going to build a store.
We even had conversations like, okay, are we just out here to have fun? Because we're going to try to get the high score, and everybody gets all fired up and like, yeah, that's what I'm here for. So they were all in too, and you're just running and gunning.
And you have to make that kind of score,
And if you go south of the lake down there, you got to work too hard to get to trees, and I mean, it's a whole different ball game.
Oh yeah, you go down there and you start getting around Gar Hill. That's where the rough starts, and there's been casts from the club go down there.
I do. I've been there on casts on back Keeler Road, and if they drop off at Keeler Road down towards the lake,
it's Gar Hill's steep as a cow's face. And
yeah.
you got to know how to hunt it too. If you know the terrain, you can get up on one ridge and pretty well stay in it. But you go trying to cross them hollers, every one of them as they go, you're going to be gutted.
Especially now with the honeysuckle and the spice bush and stuff is in there as thick as it is.
And used to, I'm talking about quite a few years back, whenever we'd have a hunt at the club and, they're drawing for guides and stuff. And I was pretty well known. If you drew me, you were going to the lake,
Yeah.
And because you didn't have the traffic and you could hunt all your time in there and still go, but they just dreaded it. People from away from here, from Ohio and different places, where it's real flat, they say, oh, I hope I don't draw him. I don't want to go to the lake. But now the coon population, it's hard to go somewhere and not hit a coon.
Right.
If the dogs are looking,
That's right.
We got way more coons than we've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And that's helped us also on hunts,
Well, what was the coon population when you were hunting in the 70s? After you were doing all your, heavy competing and everything, let's tell everybody what the coon population was like here in Indiana back in the 70s to mid 80s.
I'm going to say in the 70s, of course, if you had the 3-hour hunt, that made a difference. It was 3 hours back then. If you scored on 3 to 4 coons, you had a good cast.
Yeah.
And
everybody had a coon dog.
Yeah.
And fur prices were up. People were trapping. Everybody had a coon dog. You had to have a coon dog to be able to score on 3 or 4 coons in 3 hours.
Yeah. And
wouldn't you agree?
Because you're right. Because in season, when they were up like that, you killed all you could.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I never did kill more than one out of a tree. Dad never would let me do that to start with, and I just stuck with that and never did.
Right.
But when you're making more money out there coon hunting in one night than you make a week at work, you're going to go. You're going to hunt them. You're going to get as many as you can,
Right.
And it really didn't hurt our population. It regulated it some. But now they're not working, they're just overrunning everything.
Yeah.
But I was making $75 a week, and coons were bringing $30 to $40.
Say that again.
I was making $75 a week where I worked at. And coons were bringing anywhere from $20 to $40, and I killed 3 or 4 or 5 coon. I've made more money than I did all week working.
Exactly. You could double your salary just by hunting, killing 1 coon a night, 5 nights a week.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's unreal, isn't it?
No, it's crazy. It's crazy. But back in those days, there were people. Those were the days when people would steal a good coon dog. I mean,
I had one stolen.
Yep. There were all kinds of cutthroats and lowlifes that were coon hunting back then. There really were.
Oh, yeah.
There were good men, but, there were a lot of...
There was a lot of them that gave coon hunters a bad name.
Yep. There were a lot of cutthroats and lowlifes, and when the money left, I used to tell my coworkers this all the time. I said, you guys are judging a whole group of people based on the bad apples. Because guys like your dad and your grandpa, they weren't outlaws. They were good country coon hunting people, but when the money got in it, then that's when. And I told them, I said, when the money left, those are the guys that we're arresting now for, commercial fishing illegally when the eggs are high, for stealing timber, for cooking meth, for stealing copper. They just find a new criminal venture to get into because they're too sorry to work. And they just moved on.
Yeah. But you'll always hear more about the bad than you do the good.
Yeah.
In anything.
Yeah, for sure.
But I mean, that did hurt us for a good while.
It did.
On that.
When I got hired, man, I tried to keep it a secret that I was a coon hunter. In 1990.
And back when we had closed season in the summer.
Yeah.
When we had a closed season, we weren't allowed to hunt. No Ohio could.
Mm-hmm.
And you're still trying to keep a dog. If you're going to go to some hunts, you want to kind of halfway keep them in shape and then tuned up.
Well, that's what I was getting ready to say. Remember back in the day when they would say that there wouldn't be very many hunts between November in about May. And then everybody would talk about, when the hunts start up again, then we'll start doing this. Well, now the hunts go year-round, because our running season's open.
Well, almost every night of the week there's a hunt somewhere.
Absolutely.
Except Sunday nights.
Yep. Yeah.
And that was my night to stay home.
Yeah. I hear you.
But my dad, when you was talking about that close season, and in the summertime when we was even allowed to run, he would not let me kill a coon. He was always worried to death. He said, I've never been arrested, and you're not going to get me arrested. And we used to have right up there before you get to Jay's Restaurant, which people don't know, it's 2 blocks up the street from where I'm at here. A game warden lived right across the street. And his boy was in school a couple of years younger than me, and he told me, he said, my dad comes up in my bedroom and takes his binoculars and watches your house to see if you leave to go hunting during that closed season.
The Houndsman XP Podcast Network is powered by Cajun Lights. All of your lighting needs for hunting can be taken care of at Cajun Lights. They have 3 models of cap lights. I'm going to run through them real quick. You've got the Rougarou, which is their high-end light. If you're a competition hunter and you got to find that coon up in a tree and it's all riding on finding that coon, you'll want the Rougarou on your head. Next is the Bayou. That's a pretty standard light, but it's got packed with features. It's got multiple colors. It's got walking lights. It's got the red, the green, the amber. It's all built in right into that light. And then you have one of my personal favorites, the Micro Gator. The Micro Gator is an ultra lightweight cap light. It's got all the features of a white light, red, green, and amber. I've used this light for everything from finding bear tracks early in the morning to coon hunting at night to working on plumbing in the house, changing tires on the side of the road. My truck doesn't leave the driveway without a Cajun light in it, and that light is the Micro Gator. Every Cajun light is durable, made from the highest quality components, and it is backed by Cajun's top-rated customer service. Check out Cajun Lights. You can go to our website at houndsmanxp.com. Go to our sponsors page, hit that link, it'll take you right to Cajun Lights. Check them out. The Houndsman XP Podcast only endorses products that we would use ourselves, and I do use Elite Nutrition supplements. Elite Nutrition offers supplements for your horses, your mules, your dogs, and even you. These all-natural products work with your dog's natural immune system and its normal, natural body function, not to treat symptoms, but to fix problems. Stop pumping pharmaceutical toxins into yourself or your dogs and start using these all-natural products that work with the perfect system that God gave you. Go to tryelitenutrition.com and check out their products for wound care, prebiotic, probiotic, puppy stuff. It's all there. Parasite control. If you expect extreme performance, you need Elite Nutrition.
I said, you got to be kidding. He said, nope, he sure does. And Dad wouldn't go, but I would slip out every once in a while. I had places that back a dead-end road where somebody lived and had big woods behind me. I'd just park at the house and go in there and make a few trees and come back.
Let your dog out to use the bathroom, and he just took off.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he said, you're going to get caught. You're going to get caught. And I lucked out. Out of all them years I've hunted, I've been arrested one time for carrying, 2 times. Once for trespassing and once for carrying a rifle in a closed
remember
season.
The trespassing deal. Yeah.
No, I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking
well,
about...
let's not even get into that.
Right. I'm talking about one probably in the 80s.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I had the chief of police hunting with me, and the sheriff and him didn't get along. And when the sheriff got called out there, my truck was there. He didn't know he was with me. And they called us out on a bullhorn, but we laid the rifle in the creek and walked out there to him. It was in summertime. I mean, running season was in, but you couldn't kill him, but I was generally hunting a young dog that needed a coon every now and then. So I come walking out to the road, and I had permission for the whole section up through there except one little farm on the end. It had about a 20-acre field, and we the dogs got treed on the guy had permission on, but it was closer down there, so we drove down there and parked at the gate, walked across that field, and he'd already cut it for silage. Walked across that field, got the dogs, and was getting ready to come out when they hollered at us. Come out there, and there was 2 or 3 farmers there and the sheriff and everything, and he's standing there talking to me, and I'm trying to tell him, look, all we did was walk across your field to get those dogs. We did not come down here and turn loose. I hunted on Ballingers, which owned the rest of that section.
Mm-hmm.
And the sheriff said, well, he wants you arrested. And I had him about halfway talked out of it. And the farmer that lived across the road didn't allow no hunting whatsoever. He said, you better arrest him now while you got a chance. If not, he'll be back here tomorrow night with 3 of his buddies.
Oh, gee whiz.
I said, Lordy be, we're going to get... So he gives us a ticket for trespassing. And I turn around and I can't find Bobby. I'm not going to mention the rest of his name, but he was chief of police. Finally, when they got ready to go, I said, where was you at? He held his hand up and he said, I wrote all them license plates down. They better go to Richmond and get their groceries. I said, surely not. And he said, oh, yeah. Well, when we got to go to court that morning, the judge called us back in his chambers before people was in there. And he said, now, look, Bobby, this is not going to look good, me citing you. And you got people, he was in uniforms. You got to come in here for the ones that you've arrested.
Mm-hmm.
He said, how about you guys just go down these back steps to the clerk and pay her and go on about your way. And I said, that's fine with me. And he said, how's $5 a piece sound? And he let us off with $5 a piece. And that woman and son that owned that farm that had us arrested, when it come out in the paper, she went to the commissioners and throwed a fit. I mean, because that's all we got was the $5. And it had to be put in the paper, and it come out that way. And then Bobby stopped her twice and give her a safety check on her car all the way around. That's the good old days. That's back in a small town.
Yeah.
Like you can get by with that kind of stuff. So, but that was one of the fun parts of things. Dad, of course, when I got back, Dad said, I told you. You was going to fool around and get arrested.
Yeah. Well, every kid does. I mean, you got to go through some of that stuff. I was just lucky, really. What were some of the who were some of the guys you said you hunted for again? For the guy that owned Radar?
Yeah, Billy Stinson.
Billy Stinson.
And then I hunted Stylish Lipper for Russell Wagers.
That's the one that I'm supposed to talk to you about. I got strict instruction to talk to you about hunting Stylish Lipper.
Yeah. He brought him to me. He had just bought him, and he was young.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to know if I would hunt him.
And what was Stylish Lipper out of, you remember?
Lipper.
Mm-hmm. And what female?
I can't remember what the female was on him. Biggest dog I've ever had.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, that dog he weighed 70, 80 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
He had a head you couldn't hardly get in a 5-gallon bucket.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest, he's the loudest dog I've ever heard in my life. Not that I've hunted, that I've ever heard out of any dogs I've been with. He actually would hurt your ears if you was trying to get the leash on him on the tree.
Yeah.
And he wasn't a chop mouth tree dog. He wasn't a ball mouth. He had a squall. And he just kept his mouth open, and it just never come clear shut, and he'd never shut up.
I've noticed dogs that do that when you got
just
a dog
tree out of his throat. Just keep his mouth
just
open.
Keep their mouth open. They stay treed.
And that dog had more sense. He could be wound up like that on a tree, and even if you didn't have a leash on him, I could call his name and say something to him. He'd drop right off that tree and walk right over to me to put a leash on him. I mean, he had the common sense, to go with one. And people talk about dogs drowning other dogs out and stuff. It's, I don't care what kind of, unless they just got a real low mouth. It's hard to drown another dog out.
Yeah, it is.
On a tree. Now, I mean, it's just common sense, But a friend of mine he was my hunting partner. He hunted with me for 17 years, me and him every night. He had 2 females. And they had decent mouths. Well, we was right down there on the lake, before it was all that, where you're going into the Shriners Club in that deep dip down there, and that big bottom off to the right, we turned them in there, and they struck way up that bottom, all three of them, and got treed. Well, we went back and drove all the way around to the dead-end road that comes in above it, and Carl said, I don't think my females are with him. They didn't have no tracking stuff then either. And we parked that guy's barn and walked halfway across the field. And when we got to the top of the hill, they were in the bottom of a holler. He could hear his two dogs. Did not know they were there till we got within 200 yards of
Usually when a dog's treed like that, they'll shut up a little bit, and you could oh yeah, there's my dog.
Yeah. And Carl said he never cussed or nothing. He said, Dad, blame. He said, that dog's loud. He said, I didn't think my dogs was with him. I mean, that's kind of mouth Lipper put on dogs, and Stylish Lipper did also.
Yeah.
But I hunted him all winter for him, and he wanted me to take him to some hunts in the spring, and I said, okay. And he said, I've got 4 or 5 guys wanting to breed to him already. He said, I'm going to send them to you. And I said, whoa, I'm not going to do the breeding. I said, if you want me to hunt the dog and handle him, I'll do that for you for a while. Put the degrees on him and stuff, but I'm not taking care of the breeding. I said, I hunt about all night. I work nights now. I go after I get off work, and I'm not going to fool with all those people in the daytime.
Yeah.
He said, well, I'm going to take him home. And I said, well, then that's what you need to do. So.
Yeah, for as long as I've known you, Donnie, the rule was don't try to get hold of Donnie before noon.
Right.
It's always afternoon because you're working nights and you're hunting every night. And
I'd get off work and take right off of hunting.
Yep.
Hunt till about daylight.
Yep. Sleep for 4 or 5 hours.
There's sometimes I'd come, and when I deer hunted for a while way back in the day, sometimes I'd come in, change clothes, and go deer hunting till about noon, come back home, take a nap, and go to work.
Yep. What other?
But I'm paying for that now.
What other dogs left an impression on you? If you look back out over all those years, what was your favorite dog you hunted?
You mean for other people or myself?
Well, just whatever dog you liked the best out of all those years.
I'm going to say the best as far as just night after night, having coons, good dog to pleasure hunt, but yet I could still win with him, was the dog I called Bally, Silver Creek Bally.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the one I done the most winning with, and in big hunts, got in the top 23 world hunts, with him, and got into semifinals of the ACHA World Hunt with him, and I was leading the cast, and they called a timeout, and some people picked my dog up and moved him 4 miles and kept me out of being in the final 4. I was a high-scoring dog the first 3 out of 4 nights. They gave a trophy each night for the high-scoring dog, and I ended up placing 9th overall out of 600 dogs with him. And I got in the top 20 UKC World Hunt twice. So he was the best one for me.
What year would that have been?
1983.
You did all that in 1983?
Mm-hmm.
So you 83, 84, or 82, 83?
83, 84.
Yeah. How was he bred?
He was out of Derrickson Singing Banjo, which was H.T. Derrickson. And he goes back to the old banjo dog, Singing Banjo did. And then his mother was just a boy's female down in Tennessee, Birdstown, Tennessee. It's where we used to go buy a lot of young dogs and pups. And that guy had the mother to him, and they'd bred her to 4 or 5 different dogs, and she just sewed good hounds out of it. She was a real good reproducing female that never had a title on her, never been to a hunt.
Yeah.
It's called Sutter's, what was it, Sutter's something, that guy's name. But that just shows you, she was just a coon dog back in them hills, and they had enough sense and bred her to big name dogs, plus they bred her to some of their local dogs, and every pup that she had, there'd be a couple good pups out of each litter. It just showed she was the one doing the reproducing.
How did Bally? How was he? What did he possess? What kind of traits did he have that made him so successful?
When you cut him loose, he was looking for a coon right away. He did fire in places. He'd start hunting as soon as you turned him loose.
So he could tree one 10 feet from you? Or?
Right. I've had him tree coons 75 yards from the truck. So when you turn loose, the other dog's opening over in the other part of the woods, and he'd have a coon.
Yeah.
And you take him off and recut him and handle good. Wasn't an ill hair in him nowhere. And if they was rough on the tree, he'd just keep running around getting out of their way.
So he wouldn't leave. He's just smart about it.
He'd stay right there, but they'd have to catch him.
And he'd tree back off the tree?
Or move around it.
If he was treed by himself, would he be up on the tree?
Stand up on the tree.
But if another dog was in there rough,
he'd let him have that sweet spot. There's a lot of them that once they get that tree first, got that sweet spot, they don't want to be moved.
Right.
But he'd move around, stay out of their way. I've seen dogs just halfway chase him. He'd just keep him moving around the tree and keep treeing.
Did you ever have anybody try to minus you for him being treed back off the tree?
No, he'd never get that far off of it. And he'd always be looking up.
It would be obvious.
And when I first bought him, he wasn't quite right at a year old. The very first night I hunted him, we was at the club, and I turned him up behind the club just to see,
Yeah.
And we bought him on a guy's word down there. And when we went to pick him up, that guy said, he's around here somewhere, and called him. And he had an old boat turned over on its side, to keep from getting water in it.
Yeah.
Here he come out from under that boat and just stretched real big and walked over to him. We give $800 for him.
Just on his word, brought him back up
that
here.
was pretty good money then.
Yeah.
Because I knew the guy that hunted with him, and he said this pup's really starting. He'd be something that'd work good up in your country.
Mm-hmm.
And that night he'd tree and then he'd hush. He'd tree and he'd hush. And I went on in there to see what he was doing. He was digging at the roots of the tree.
Yeah.
And then he'd look up and bark for something. Then he'd dig again. I tried 4 or 5 different things, and I finally got him broke of it. But I didn't want to. One guy told me, he said, pull him back and pour some ammonia down that hole and let him go back in. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that and him ruin his nose or something,
Right.
But I smoked back then too. I'd lay a cigarette down in there and let it get to smoking and turn him loose, and he'd run back in there and he'd back up. Yeah, and I'd done that 4 or 5 times with him, and he quit. But that year at that hunt over there, that was in 83.
I've seen other dogs that'll dig like that at the base of a tree. I don't know what causes that.
Well, I think like down there where he was running loose, he was staying so long on squirrels and other things that he'd get tired of barking and probably go to digging. It's the only thing I could figure why one would do that,
I've seen dogs that were, chewers and stuff, and a lot of times ear problems will cause all kinds of weird tree habits.
They got some bad ear mites. They're shaking their head. They'll stop barking some because it hurts their ears.
Yep. I've cleaned up some tree dogs just by treating ears over the years.
But that's what I was going to tell you, too. That's the only dog that I've ever asked her about, because over there in 83 at the World Hunt, next to the last night, I was still in and had the high scores. A guy offered me $10,000 for him. And that was in 83. That'd be like $50,000 now or better. Right. And I called her and asked her. I said, what do you think? She said, there's no use you calling and asking me, because I'm not saying. She said, if I say go ahead and sell, and Dad's standing there, he said, sell that dog, son.
Yeah.
He said, it's only a dog. He could get killed tomorrow.
Right.
And he said, when you put them on your hips, they don't run no deer. They don't leave nothing, do this and that. You got him. And I could have used the money big time at that time. And she said, you do what you want to do. Because if I tell you to sell him, all I want to hear after you get home is, I wished I hadn't sold that dog.
Yeah.
But after that, I buried him. He died with his kidneys failed on him. And after I buried him, I made my mind up. If I ever made that kind of money on a dog again, they'd leave.
Yeah.
And so I always didn't have them for sale, but they could be bought. And if they give my price and I sold them, then I'd go get another one, but start on it. But with him, he was the only one that I wouldn't sell.
Yeah, I did. I went through that with my jazz female. I've never had a dog. I'm gonna eat my words here if I don't measure them pretty good. I don't think I've ever had a dog die of old age at my house. And it's not because I don't like them. It's just because I've given them away to kids. Remember that boon dog I had, that plot?
Yeah.
A buddy of mine had his grandkid wanted to hunt, and I sent him down there and let him, and he ended up dying old age down there.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's the way it be. That's what I was saying. I never had another one after that I wouldn't sell.
Yeah.
And that's
what I mean.
That's why I've never had one die of old age on me.
No, that's what I mean too. Because you always like messing with those dogs, though, those younger dogs.
Yeah, but Baldy was only 5 years old when he died.
Mm-hmm.
His hair really looked bad all the time. It always looked like a hog's back. It was thin and get scaly looking, and I about hated to take him in for pictures because he always looked like I wasn't taking care of him. And finally come to find out the year before he died, I took him up to a guy, and he sent me to Purdue with him. And in one hour, they'd already come out there and told me what it was, and it was his thyroid.
Oh, no kidding.
Mm-hmm.
So you had a for real thyroid dog back in the 80s.
Yeah, that's the only dog I ever knew. And it was just, that's why he wouldn't get no weight. You know, I mean, I fed him the best feed. Back then, the way he was looking, I went to Eukanuba, bought Eukanuba feed, and I mean, back then, Eukanuba feed was 10 times higher than anything else.
Yeah.
And I thought I tried that on him for a good while, and that didn't help either. And then that's when I finally took him up to Purdue.
And they diagnosed him with thyroid.
Mm-hmm. And
so you started all that thyroid stuff.
And now you hear a lot of people talking about thyroid stuff in dogs, but
nobody ever heard of it.
Right. But then again, that could be also in genetics of dogs that have had it. And the more they've bred them, the more these other dogs are going to have
That's
it.
right. That's right. Yeah.
Because we didn't ever have hardly any problems with dogs way back. You know, I mean, it may be ear mites or fleas or ticks or something like that, but you didn't even have the tick disease.
You didn't even worry about ticks.
No.
I mean, you pick them off the dog.
Right.
But now we're, with all this tick disease and stuff and
where's
Lyme's
that
disease.
come from? Why didn't you have that with ticks back then?
It was the first cases of that tick-borne disease came from Wisconsin, Minnesota up there, and it just spread out.
The only thing I ever heard of, and that was in the 90s, probably, the very first blasto cases I ever heard of, dogs coming from the south out of that stagnant water and all that.
Yeah.
And heartworms, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That made a run for a while, and then now you don't even hear much of that anymore.
Heartworms. Donnie, I got, we could sit here and talk for hours. I want to come back up and talk some more.
All right.
But I'd love to. I appreciate it. But we got to wrap it up on this one. And we just scratched the surface. We just hit the high spots.
Yeah. We tried to get from 8 years old to 30 years old.
Yeah. We got that first part. We didn't even cover it as well as I would have. But
yeah, we never even got into Frankenstein and Slugger and all that, you know.
You've done so much.
That was in later years, though.
Have you been inducted into the Tree and Walker Hall of Fame, or had any dogs? Which dogs?
Slugger got in the Hall of Fame, and I wasn't down as a breeder because I didn't do much breeding prior to till I got hooked up with Frank Johnson.
Yeah.
And we got, going with that line of dogs and stuff. But I won Hunter of the Year from Walker Association.
I know it's hard to tell on yourself, but for people that are listening, I mean, Donnie Huber has been a well-known name in the tree and walker breed for as long as I've been in coon hunting, as long as I've known about the Tree and Walker Breeder Association. You've accomplished so much, Donnie, and with your dogs, with hunting, the service. I mean, the service that you've given to the Tree and Walker Association, to Hannah's Creek, when we needed directors for the Tree Dog Alliance, you jumped in. I mean, you spent your whole life doing this, and it's pretty awesome. And I'm glad I get to help tell a little part of your story.
Yeah. And that's why I say earlier, that was probably the hardest thing I've had to do is to quit.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine.
You know, but when your health's telling you one thing and you trying to do the other, you know, and it got down to the point, you know, since these last surgeries, I just can't walk.
Right.
So,
right.
And I'm not one to sit at the road and listen. I tried driving for some boys after that, different ones say, come on, drive for us anyhow. I can't stand that sitting on the road listening.
Yeah, I
and
know.
My dad done that for years. After he got older, I'd do the hunting, and he'd sit on the road, or he'd drive around, pick me up, and I just can't do it. I don't know how he did.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot more story to tell here, Donnie, and I don't want it to end here, so I'm not even going to end it. I'm just going to tell everybody to be continued, because we're going to pick it up.
I enjoy it
on another day. I've had a ton of fun sitting here talking to you.
I feel privileged that you've asked me.
And I wasn't kidding around, folks. We are going to pick it up on another day. Donnie's got so many things to share with us. Just a great story that I want to bring to all of you. Anyway, we're going to have to roll out of here. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure, please, I'm asking you, go to Apple Podcasts, give us a like, leave us a review. Those are very important for us. So, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Houndsman XP Podcast. This is Fair Chase. The Houndsman XP Podcast is fueled by Joy Dog Food. Joy Dog Food has a rich tradition of supporting the houndsmen of America. Founded in 1945, Joy is proud of its history and the relationship it has built with the American houndsman. And in 76 years, there's never been a recall. Made with 100% American-made high-quality ingredients, Joy Dog Food has one of the highest calorie-dense formulas on the market. For 76 years, this made-in-America product has kept hunting dogs in the field day after day, season after season. And when we say made in America, Joy has a long track record of fighting for American freedoms by being on the front lines against the animal rights movement and their extremist tactics. Joy will fuel your hounds and fight for your freedoms, fueled by Joy.